Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst. On a day to remember, before this week is done, Joe Biden could be the president-elect by unofficial but reliable vote counts, which leaves nothing left but the madness of Donald Trump. Trump rattles on about stopping the voting or counting the ballots or counting only the legal ballots, but not the illegal ballots, whatever the hell that means. The question now is, what is your goal here, Donald? Do you really believe that you can reverse the election with arguments over whether people who fled the pandemic could still vote at home in Nevada? Seriously, even Republican electoral lawyers are saying there's no there. And he may not even have the money for these fights he's bound to lose, even with his own judges ruling. So I don't think this is a winning strategy. But what's more important is I don't believe Donald Trump thinks so either. These are not 500 vote margins of victory like the one in Florida when the Supreme Court gave George W. Bush the presidency in 2000. Take Nevada, where Biden leads by 12,000 votes, several percentage points. What scares me is that this may not be about reversing Biden's victory at all. This is incitement, plain and simple, and recklessly irresponsible. Trump is stirring up the far right wing as the new resistance. These are men with guns and QAnon accounts. One amateur armed militia showed up outside the Maricopa County polling site in Arizona, demanding that votes be counted, which was exactly what was going on inside. Let's play that.
All we see is Democrats.
Are you Republican or Democrat?
The only people working in this building are Democrats.
Are you Republican or Democrat? I just got a simple question. Republican here.
Okay, this is dangerous. The group was yelling, "You are fake news," as Brianna Whitney reports, and profanities to the press behind the caution tape, who's been inside reporting on the Arizona election results, which are being counted not by just Democrats in a Republican-controlled state. This is dangerous. A coup at least suggested that someone was in charge. The coup is done for. Nada. It's not happening. The election result will be certified and Biden will be inaugurated. But Trump's tweets and middle-of-the-night news conferences are incitements to violence that he will not be able to rein back in, even if he wants to. How does anyone tame this far right? They have grown. They see Trump as their supreme leader, and they aren't going away. And they don't believe anything that does not come out of their little propaganda outlets that are being propped up right now. Domestic terrorism by the far right and white supremacists was the number one threat even before this election. We really need to brace ourselves for what it will take to calm these people down or shut them down for spreading falsities and inciting violence. Stop incentivizing their algorithm looking at you, big tech. This is the real law and order question. We aren't going to turn these people into Democrats, not even neoliberal ones. We're not even going to turn them into, centrist Republicans. But we can't let a cycle of political violence swirl out of control because Donald Trump won't shut up. Working people deserve better, even from Donald Trump. It's revealing how impulsive Trump is. We knew this, and how Trump didn't really have a strategy beyond voter suppression. Trump had the one strategy, and now it's turned totally kooky. The election is going to be over, and you're going to lose in the courts, Mr. President, if you take it there. But he keeps going, and his base is showing up armed. And our leaders that could be intervening, well, we have leaders not equipped to manage this gritty extremist existence in either party. Sure, Joe Biden can talk to John Kasich across the partisan divide, but I doubt either of them can talk to a band of QAnon followers who believe Donald Trump had the presidency stolen from him and tell them to take a breath or reason with them. We are entering something very scary. And we will do everything that we can here, at least, to help us navigate these months and years ahead. Today, we have an extraordinary show. Eric Blanc is here to discuss organizing in the red states and what kind of progress has happened in red states like Florida. And later we have Representative Rabb back to talk about what is happening in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia in his district. It is coming down to that vote. He's been saying it. And we also have Arun Chaudhary on to talk about how we as progressives seize this moment from the failing neoliberals. Stick around, make sure to smash that like button, click that little bell to know when we go live, because like last night, we went live with Tommy Sunshine, who is on the streets of New York City, talking about the police presence that is growing, and in response to what? What? I mean, very few people had showed up. If you didn't watch that, that was live. You get those alerts by clicking that little bell. And of course, we put everything up on our Patreon account. So if you listen to podcasts like I do, Patreon is where you should go. We also put extra content on Patreon. And let's just be real, guys. Patreon is what's sustaining us. And every little dollar makes a huge difference. Of course, YouTube does do this too, but Patreon is really what makes this channel what it is. It gives us the ability to produce more content, to edit more content, to have the show put together live, which is much harder for us than doing it in, the way we did once a week before. That is how we build this show up. And I'm going to tell you, this is a really scary time we're approaching. We need independent media. And I promise you we won't be doing clickbait stuff. It's really fun to just constantly be at war with our least favorite Democrats, and we will do that, but we will do much more. We'll help you have a toolkit for where we go from here, how to organize in red states like Eric Blanc, how to understand the electoral numbers in Pennsylvania with Chris Rabb, who represents the highest turnout district in all of Philadelphia, which is the center of the world right now. What's going on in Arizona, Maricopa County, with my friends in Arizona and me, who understands it a little bit more, and Arun Chaudhary. I mean, these are not easy gets. So this is why being a patron is a big deal. It's how we are able to do these types of shows. So you can join us for as low as $5 a month. That $5 is huge. And if you can contribute more, of course, it just gets better. You get more content, you get a mug, you get a bag, you get a sticker, the jam. Patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. We love having to sell this show, but that's what you get with independent media. All right, we will be right back with Eric Blanc to talk about what's going on in these red states. All right, welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Eric Blanc is the author of the brilliant book, Red State Revolt, The Teachers' Strike Wave and Working Class Politics. He is a member of DSA in New York City and was a national surrogate on the Bernie Sanders campaign. Eric, I'm coming to you right now live from Arizona, where I've been this week during the election. And it's like the center of the world with like 5 other places in this country. But what I find so exciting is that this proposition was on the ballot to fund public schools. Tell me, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, it was one of the big wins for sure of the election. It was a little bit off the radar for progressives across the country, but it shouldn't be because this was the biggest tax the rich initiative nationally that won. It's major. It's major, and it's really a testament to the continuity of the strike that happened in 2018. which won important pay raises, but really said we're only going to be able to create the schools, begin to move towards creating schools we need if we make the rich pay to massively fund the schools that we need. And the last time around, initially after the strike, they tried to put this on the ballot. The Supreme Court of the state sort of anti-democratically kicked it off. But this time was on the ballot. And sure enough, when given the chance, people in Arizona voted in favor of their educators and their students.
Arizona has the 49th worst public school system in the country, last time I checked. If that's, I don't know when the last time I checked, but that's the number I was hearing. Folks who earn over $250,000 a year are taxed at what level? Like, do you know off the top of your head?
The specific numbers, it's definitely over 250. I don't know the specific numbers off the top of my head, but basically, yeah. So it's an increase on the top income earners to pay for schools, pay for higher wages, but then also just for the really basic infrastructure that it's not just Arizona, there's this constant battle between who's 49th and 50th, and there's about like 5 that, are in that general vicinity. And so it does show that really there is I'd say that there's a potential majoritarian constituency for our politics. And when given the chance to seize it, people do. But unfortunately, they're very frequently not given that chance.
Exactly. I think what's also interesting about this proposition is that it's, which will not be law, is that it taxes LLCs too, which, we haven't heard a lot of. In New York, that's a whole other conversation. It's much more complicated, but it was amazing that they were able to push this through and what is a very pro-business libertarian, style, even with the Democrats government in Arizona. In Florida, we saw the $15 minimum wage vote approved on the Florida ballot, even though a lot of folks that were Trump supporters voted for it. Shocker, people want higher wages. What a concept. But, I think what was interesting about that ballot item was it flew in the face of the messaging, which has always been, well, what are small businesses going to do? And even when I ran for office, our ballot line was pay people more. And I was proposing a $30 minimum wage in New York. And I can't believe how many progressives were like, but what about the small businesses? What about the small businesses? And it just seems like that message is not pushing through. Even in a red state like Florida, is this what's to be learned from this?
I think the big lesson is that class politics is necessary and it's not being offered. And so that's really important because it's not just the economy in general. It's specifically talking to workers as workers and trying to organize and rebuild really a sense of identity along those lines. Mm-hmm. And so I think that part of that is speaking to people's material interests, which the Democratic Party has not done for decades, right? But then it's also explaining that their material interests can be furthered not by ragging on or at the expense of other members of the working class, but sort of in conjunction with them. Because that's, Trump is able to speak to some people's real material difficulties, but he does that really at the expense of others. And so in the absence, though, of a real positive, solidaristic vision of class politics, that's really what I think leads to Trumpism. And so you see in Florida, you see in Arizona, the potentialities for moving in that direction, but it's just so hard right now to even start cohering in that direction because the Democratic Party really does everything it can at most points to stomp it out.
So how were they able to get on the ballot, these propositions in a presidential year?
Right. So, I know the Arizona case better. The Arizona case is a really good example of what happens when you have a union that wants to fight and push progressive measures, because really the backbone of the measure in Arizona was the teachers union, which got revitalized after their strike and which has the resources to really push a agenda through despite the wishy-washiness of the Democratic Party. So I think that one of the big lessons here is that if we want to see on a political level the type of social democratic socialist class politics, I find it very hard to imagine that happening without labor movement retaking its place as sort of the backbone of the type of coalition we need.
It's fascinating because you look at the wins, like just talking electorally for a second about like the big progressive wins, they've been in progressive districts, and it's so powerful that you know the squad's there and Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush, and it's wonderful to have those voices in Congress. But if we want to really shift the makeup of Congress, we're going to have to get a little deeper and start electing progressives in what is more traditionally deemed as swing districts, and in districts in Arizona and districts in Florida. So that, but that's going to require more than just a DSA. It's going to require real tremendous labor to get those people elected. Are folks really thinking that deeply yet about this next phase of the progressive movement? Have you heard anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just to flag, one of the DSA endorsed candidates that won this week was in Montana. So there is some work being done along those lines, and there are socialists organizing pretty heroically across the country. That being said, it's definitely the case that we have weaknesses, and there's a geographic concentration in certain places, particularly for national political elections.
Right,
it makes it hard. So I think that it was a wake-up call for a lot of folks this week to really see how strategically central people I've known and have been arguing that organizing the South is central for the labor movement and really for reviving socialism. Because as long as you have such a huge part of the country unorganized, you're just always going to be fighting with one hand tied behind your back. But I think that just looking at the centrality of Georgia, looking at the centrality of Arizona, it really hammered home, I think, to a lot of people who maybe abstractly know it, but are like, oh, wow, we could make a break, not just these states, North Carolina. There's a lot of places that with a slightly stronger labor movement, a slightly stronger democratic socialist presence, together with a revitalized labor movement and community organizations, you could really see speaking to building a coalition that doesn't currently exist.
And in many of these states, especially if you look at like Nevada and Arizona, and Georgia too, Georgia's more the New South. You've got the Mason-Dixon line politics of the Western states that used to be Republican. There's a different type of labor. It's not that, white working class Rust Belt labor that the press likes to just beat the drum on all day long. It's domestic workers and healthcare workers and casino workers and teachers, of course, everywhere. Many are majority women-held unions. And it's more diverse too. So like there's just like a different dynamic in terms of how to make that coalition too, don't you think? I mean, like,
yeah, 100%. And that's what I find so frustrating a lot of times about when people push back and say, oh, if you talk about class politics, really what you're talking about is like white guys. It's like, no, like not at all. The people who've been at the forefront of the labor movement in a fighting sense over the last 2 years have been women, disproportionately women of color. And so when you talk about thinking really what to rebuild a working class movement, it would be with a lot of those folks at the lead and bringing in people who used to be, involved in labor, or who might still be union members, but voted for Trump. Again, 40%, just like in 2016, 40% of union members, according to the exit polls we've seen, voted for Trump, despite the endorsement of most unions for Biden. And so it speaks to this real disconnect of workers and union members included from the Democratic Party. And I don't think that you're going to be able to change that with just like tinkering around the edges of what type of centrist politics the Democrats are offering.
When you say that number, that 40%, that's nationally?
Yeah, that's the national exit polls that we've done.
So in some of these states that I'm just very curious to see, like the traditional, whatever you call Rust Belt states, the concentration is probably a little bit higher.
Yeah, for sure. We'd have to see it disaggregated by state. It's going to look quite different, but it's still a troubling overall statistic.
Wow. And yet he still was able to pull off wins in Wisconsin and Michigan. And I mean, it's truly fascinating. And I'd love to see the breakdown gender wise and age wise. That's going to come in weeks. Eric, what are some of the other things we may have missed on in red states this last election?
In red states specifically? Well, I mean, I think that the big story in some ways is, again, Texas, and the type of organizing that you're seeing there is really inspiring. So the fact that it was in play at all for the Democrats is not just a demographic issue. People talk about this in a really superficial way. We saw, if anything, the fact that Trump is making some inroads amongst people of color shows that there isn't just like some sort of destiny for people to move in the Democratic Party direction. But in Texas, for the last years, there's been serious labor organizing, community organizing, winning local ordinances for living wages, for instance, fighting around immigrant rights. And, DSA chapters together with unions and a lot of community organizations have really started building, I think, a pretty inspiring left infrastructure that has set the conditions for being able to hopefully get rid of the Republicans, both on a statewide and as a national representation. But then also sort of winning the types of labor reforms that we're going to have to fight for, even in the absence, obviously, of some sort of blue wave. It's going to be that type of bottom-up organizing. So I find Texas to be really inspiring with the local work that's happening. And I think that you also see that in Nevada, which is, depending on how you want to look at it, as far as blue or red, is another place where you see unions and DSA chapters played a big role in a lot of local races and initiatives as well.
So I think we all had this fantasy and, kind of fell for it. I even fell for it, of sweeping the Senate. And by the way, we still could win the Senate. I know that everyone's ruling it out now, but for instance, there's going to be, a runoff in 2 Senate races in Georgia. So, I mean, that alone could turn the Senate. But say we don't win the Senate, and we don't control Washington entirely, meaning we, the Democrats. We have multiple fights to pick here. I mean, in California, Prop 22 passed, and it is unfortunately that's we'll talk about it in a second, but that could be used as a model in other states. And so that's like a very supermajority in California. So you're fighting the Democrats. You're fighting for teachers, even in like New York State. We're still talking about education funding in New York State with Governor Cuomo, and he's like, he's too busy writing books about the pandemic and not actually dealing with, his state. I mean, there's just multiple fronts now that we have to fight, and do it very quickly so that Biden hopefully is responsive to this crisis. So let's talk about Prop 22. And this was like one step in the process for tech companies, right? To make sure that they don't protect their workers.
Right. So for folks,
like Uber
for folks who don't know, basically what Prop 22 passing reversed a law that had been passed in California, a good law, which would have basically treated Uber and Lyft workers, amongst others, as workers and not as independent contractors. So to make it easier for them to have better rights, to organize, and all of that. So it's an extremely dangerous precedent. And it does, just point again to the fact that in an electoral system in which corporations are allowed to basically just flood the airwaves and lie, it's not always easy to go up against huge corporations, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't even think in California, it's not the case that, most people really, if they understood the issues well, are like against Lyft and Uber workers. It's just, there's the reality that there's an insane propaganda campaign. Millions and millions and millions of dollars were used to
$200 million.
Right. So, so you're up against a lot. I think that part of what is going to happen now is that insofar as the battle is waged, we are going to have to figure out how to really change the narrative, because these companies they really framed it in like a very cynically social justice way. They are doing this on behalf of the workers, right? And so initially, because most people just aren't aware of it, they're confused. So I think that we're going to have to sort of really take the offensive on making it clear that a lot of these so-called progressive corporations really aren't that, right? That tech has this veneer of social justice that really has to be punctured. Same with Amazon. In some ways, they're even more insidious. So I think that's part of it. It's sort of analogous to how I think we have to look at the Democratic Party. The fact that some corporations aren't like so blatantly and like openly evil as others doesn't really mean that we can afford to let them off the hook. If anything, that can lead to what you just saw in California, where people thought, oh, Lyft, because it occasionally says nice things about different minority groups, which is good. It does that, is on our side. And it's clearly it's not our side. Disproportionately, overwhelmingly, people of color are the workers, right? So, it shows how shallow that sort of anti-racism from corporate America is.
It's so interesting. And, and oftentimes, like with these early tech companies, I think back to the beginnings of Facebook. Did we think that Facebook was going to potentially be more evil than Google? It took a while to kind of ease into whatever their long-term strategy was, whether they knew it at the time. All right, let's look at a state like New York. California is fun. New York is real to me. So, I mean, Andrew Cuomo was on NPR this morning. I caught this interview with him, and it was like I hit my head against the wall like 6 times in a row because he's pushing his new book about how he just like fixed COVID. That was it, guys. Nobody died in New York. Nobody has been sick. Nobody's lost their jobs. There isn't an eviction crisis. I think the last time I checked, 40% of New Yorkers were unemployed in New York City. I'm sorry, what? That's insane. So how do we deal as a movement with a state that did not win its supermajority, by the way? Everybody thought it was going to win a supermajority. New York City brought in a Republican congresswoman and may have a Republican congressman kind of overlap in Queens, but they're still counting votes. And they lost seats upstate. It's just mind-boggling that this could happen in New York. And we're stuck. Like, it was already bad enough with Cuomo. Now it's just going to be worse. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think New York is a good test case again for like why we should have zero confidence in the Democratic Party establishment, like less than zero. But it's also a good test case for how far we can get when we have an organized democratic socialist movement. I mean, in some ways, New York at this point nationally, as far as electoral politics, is our most, it's like the advanced guard, because for viewers who don't know, apart from just AOC and Jamal Bowman, who people probably have heard got elected to Congress and reelected in AOC's case, we also elected a very strong slate, swept our slate actually to Albany now we have 5 Democratic socialists, and Democratic socialists, not sort of people who got endorsed by DSA.
Like Chaudhary Brisport, for instance.
Yeah, people who are real organizers, who are members, rank and file, union activists. Jabari was a teacher, others who are nurses, who got elected on, open democratic socialist politics. And it shows there is this potentiality for electing our folks. And I think that the crucial issue right now is to show that when you have socialists in power, or at least in government, that they're able to deliver what the Democratic Party establishment, let alone the Republican, isn't able to do. So I'm very excited about seeing what our elected DSA members in Albany are going to fight around. And I think that ultimately you can use this as a test case for how you're going to rebuild like a working class movement. Because I don't think you can just do unions. You have to have both people in the state and outside the state. And you need to be able to deliver meaningful changes in people's lives. Like, I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, is that if you can have a political force that people say like, oh yeah, because of them and because of what I was able to do with them, my life is better. That's how you build a long lasting, multi-generational, strong progressive majority that can beat the Republicans and not just sort of periodically switch back and forth in office like we have right now. So I think that New York hopefully can be an example for the rest of the country too, because to be honest, it's sort of bleak on a national level with the impasse. And so I think we're going to have to prove in practice on a statewide level what working class politics can look like and try to build up from there.
Okay, I'm going to push back just a little bit. We don't have the numbers in New York State in the legislature. It's great to have, a handful join, but we still have a majority Democratic neoliberal Senate and by far Assembly. And you know how it works. Whoever controls the committees controls who has a voice. And of course, they're going to try to weaken the Democratic Socialists that get elected. So next time around, how do we win? We need to win bigger. We need to have a bigger map. And if it means more DSA members are running, fantastic. But how do we make sure that we're choosing the right races so we don't lose a couple here and there? I mean, it's just it's fantastic that we're having these wins, but the struggle just got like 500 times worse. And it happened like that when we thought we were going to have more of an avenue to win.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. So it's a really contradictory situation. I guess my thinking on this is that even having a minority of Democratic Socialists is going to be able to change the political conversation and sort of drag other Democrats kicking and screaming, hopefully, into supporting good things. And if we're able to use like our forces to sort of force the Democratic Party to make some changes, I think ultimately it's going to be that's going to go very far towards being able to keep the Republicans from coming back. And because unfortunately we don't control the Democratic Party, we don't control, I'm not sure we're going to be able to they seem impervious to good advice, So I don't really think, I have very little confidence that even if like a good strategy document on how they could run their races was given to him, I'm not sure they would do it, because they seem more interested in preserving the status quo than in, making transformative change, even if that would mean getting a majority. So I don't have much confidence in them. I think we're going to have to sort of drag, the Democrats in the same way we might have to drag Republicans. If there's enough pressure from below, then you can pass good things. We saw that in the states that struck and passed teacher raises in red states. You're even able to force Republican legislatures to pass teacher pay raises and funding for schools. So I don't think it's inconceivable that even though you don't have a progressive majority, that with enough pressure on the right issue, you can win.
I think that's great. That's very good. And we should do it at the city level too. I mean, the city council is supposedly full of progressives, but yet, is afraid of real estate and is afraid of the police union. I mean, we gotta hold those feet to the fire too, because when you start to pull back the veneer, you're like, oh, are they really that progressive?
Right. Exactly.
So hopefully.
Right. That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it everywhere. I mean, it's tricky because clearly it's easier, I think, to pressure politicians when they're not Republicans. But the reality that we've seen is that, in the absence of mass pressure, it's not very likely that the Democratic Party as a whole is going to do anything either.
Absolutely. Eric Blanc, we're going to have so much to talk about in the coming months. I'm so excited because you're one of the geniuses who's been really thinking about these issues for a long time. I didn't imagine that we would have potentially a Democratic president and a more conservative map to work with in 2021. But that just means that America did not see an alternative to Republicans. And I think that's a great opening for us. So this is where your work is so valuable.
Yeah, thanks for all of your work as well.
Thank you, Eric. All right, guys, stick around. We're going to be right back to talk about what's happening in Pennsylvania with Rep. Rabb and how progressives can seize this moment with Arun Chaudhary. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Make sure to smash that like button, get into that chat, do all the things that make the show grow, like click the little bell, because last night, we had Tommy Sunshine on, who was on the streets with thousands of police and 5 activists in New York. And I felt like that was a thing that we all needed to see. Because we've all been on the streets, and supposedly there have never been that many cops on the streets of New York at any protest that Tommy's been to, which is every protest in the last 10 years. So that's why you smash that like and click that bell, because you'll get an alert. Hi guys. We have Representative Chris Rabb, who, thank you for joining us, because it is a little busy where you are, I think. You're on mute right now. Both of you are on mute. Rep. Rabb is the representative for the 200th District of Pennsylvania in the heart of Philadelphia, Northwest Philadelphia, highest vote turnout in Pennsylvania. It's almost like that matters right now. And then Arun Chaudhary is a political filmmaker. He has worked as the official White House videographer for former President Barack Obama and, of course, for Bernie Sanders as well. And he is live from Berlin, where his book is in the background. All right, let's just start with Pennsylvania. What's going on? Update us. This is better than CNN, because I just watched a bunch of map guys do the map, and I was like, oh, we have Chris Rabb. He knows this stuff.
Yeah, I don't have the maps, but it's all up here. So let me see if I can distill it. So we have a lot of mail-in ballots. The reason we have a lot of mail-in ballots is because for Democrats anyway, we have voted overwhelmingly via mail-in ballot for multiple reasons, not the least of which is COVID, but also because so many of us have been waiting to kick Trump out of office. We didn't want to wait, so that's the way to do it. It's the first time we've done this in state history because we enacted a law at the end of 2019 to make that the case for 2020. So our only point of reference is the primary, which was delayed from April 28th to June 2nd because it was not just the height of the pandemic, but it was also after many protests and uprising here amid civil unrest and curfews and all of that. So we have tremendous turnout. So my district, as you know, it has the highest voter turnout in the state on the blue side. And it's been extraordinary. So the turnout is amazing. I would say that my experience has been that my Black voters came out to the polls and white voters trusted the mail. So,
interesting.
yes, they trusted
Why
the mail.
was that? What do you think?
I think Black folk have earned the right to have the deepest suspicion of all institutions and processes in this nation. So I think that's the reason. Better to deal with the devil you know. And so that's the polls. So turnout has been extraordinary. Now, polls closed at 8:00. There were no lines anywhere reported, at least in Philly, because a lot of people, if they didn't vote early, they voted in the morning. So we had long lines in the morning and virtually no lines. I'm used to really long lines. In 2008, we had long lines at the evening rush. No lines anywhere in my district, which was fascinating.
But it's so interesting because we talked to you on election day, and you said that the lines in the morning were longer than they were for Obama.
Yeah. So they were in the Black places. Now in 2008, they were universally long. But so many, a disproportionate amount of white Democrats voted early. So the good showing at the machines was really due to Black folk coming out on the day of. So we have a lot of ballots still being processed, and the state Supreme Court extended, tallying votes to mail-in ballots that came in after Election Day up until Friday, tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. If
You froze. You're there?
Postmark
Okay.
by November 3rd. What's that?
We
Okay,
lost
back.
you for a
All right.
second. You could.
Okay. So if they were postmarked by November 3rd, or there was no postmark, but nothing to suggest that it came in after November 3rd. And so those can't be counted until after 5 p.m. tomorrow. But we can be able to predict within reason who will win Pennsylvania potentially as early as today if the city commissioners in Philadelphia and a few other counties, most of which lean strong Democrat, will finish their counting in a matter of hours. Because now I think we're down by, that's the wrong map, roughly 100,000.
Yeah.
But I think we need to get 68% of mail-in ballots to swing to Biden in order to
Close the gap.
victory.
And doable, for sure.
It is doable, certainly in Philly.
Because it's Philly.
This is beyond Philly. This is a number of counties, but these are collar counties around Philly. So these are suburban counties that have been swinging Democrat for a few years. And so in Philly, the Biden proportion is about over 90% for mail-in ballots. So it's very high. For the counties, the other counties, and there's at least 2 counties that are purple, they still swing Democrat significantly. So there's a really good chance that Biden can clinch this and surpass 270 as early as this evening, I think. But there will still be counting probably through Saturday morning. I understand the same is true in Nevada. I don't know the status of Georgia, but my sense is if Biden doesn't win Nevada, Georgia, or North Carolina, he gets Pennsylvania. He'll get 283. Yeah, right. No, 273. Where he's at 253.
He's at 253.
Yeah. Okay. So he could get 273, and then a lot of this stuff goes away, including all of this obstructionism we're seeing now. So the reason I'm in my living room and not in downtown Philly, I would be there because they have a Count Every Vote rally, which are happening all over the country. But what's happening in Philly right now is there are Trumpsters who are trying to disrupt the vote count. It was paused for about 29 minutes, and then it was resumed. So there's some clashes going on right now.
So I'm curious because this is happening all over the country, but when you say it's been paused, they're on the outside. This is what I didn't understand about last night when all those armed amateur militiamen showed up in Maricopa County. It's like it was on the outside. Just don't go outside. They're not knocking down the doors. Why are they pausing it?
I think I think the Trump campaign was seeking an injunction. I think there was some confusion around it, but the city commissioners resumed just within a half hour, and they're going to continue to do so. Look, I mean, no courts are going to stop folks from tallying votes that were cast before and up to Election Day. Now, they may say we're going to toss out every single ballot that has come in, a second after, 8 p.m. on November 3rd. Even that, I don't think is likely. But Biden's success does not rely on such a ruling. There's a big enough margin of victory in that path for him to do that in Pennsylvania without a positive court ruling. But no court is going to stop them from counting duly cast ballots before and up to Election Day. So that's the good news. The challenge, though, is while Biden looks to make a historic victory in Pennsylvania and nationwide, my House Democratic caucus in the state legislature is shrinking. We thought we could win by net 9. What happened is they voted for Biden and then they voted for their so-called moderate Republican state
What
rep.
happens when you recruit Republicans to vote for you? In the Lincoln Project is they vote down ballot. All right, so this is a really good transition because I said this the day after the election and people were like, how dare you say this? But it was true. Hillary Clinton, based on the margins, now understand, let's just start with the premise that historic turnout. So if you get more people to vote, you can close that 77,000 gap that lost Hillary Clinton the election. But based on the percentage, the margins right now, Hillary Clinton did better in 2016 than Joe Biden is today. And there's no better proof than Nevada, which Hillary Clinton won, just straight up. But also looking at the districts in Pennsylvania and seeing Biden was supposed to be this working class, Rust Belt speaker, who could get all the sexes to come back over to the man. A run. and by the way, Hillary brought in down-ballot races. We swept in with a bunch of Democrats across the country, and obviously just got better in 2018.
Yes.
What's going on, Arun? You're you've been in the rooms with these neoliberals strategizing. You've been trying to get their brains to process how to message to their base rather than Republicans. What are they doing? What are
Well, I mean, in the end, it's almost a very ordinary kind of post 2000s election stuck into a very unusual circumstance, right? You saw all the kind of friction spots being all the places that you'd think it would be. You wouldn't even really know a pandemic was going on. It almost felt like it wasn't a Joe Biden versus Hillary Clinton thing. It was you were actually seeing more of a generic Rorschach blob versus 2016 when people either did or really didn't like Hillary Clinton. They were thinking about it. It really doesn't seem like people were thinking about Joe Biden or not thinking about Joe Biden when they were voting. I think, which maybe speaks towards the dissection we should make of the kind of Biden-less content that was created, a lot of the kind of Biden-less campaign, the kind of lead from behind campaign, which I think I was on this program lauding last time, saying that was a good thing they were doing, was actually keeping him out of the way. So maybe I was wrong about that. Although we also all three of us were talking about how If there was good turnout, that was interesting. And if there was mega good turnout, that meant that there were definitely some Trump voters inside there. You know, like there's just
or
no
just
way
Republican voters
without like, you know, just just Republican voter. You know, these people, like there's a lot of counties out there, and if they all have little spikes, it just adds up to a hill of hurt. It really does. Messaging wise, I think it's important to say exactly what you said and say it over and over again, which is that Republicans came out to vote for Republicans because that's what Republicans do. The only people who were surprised by this are Democrats. The only, again, organized center-left party in the entire world that works directly with their opponents as often as they do. And progressives need to make sure that it's clear that the people making up the margins of victory are reluctant folks and younger folks and more marginalized folks who were specifically left out of the Democratic Party convention and messaging. This has happened. This is a bill that's come due. And I think you're going to see progressives during potentially a Biden transition that starts in earnest as early as tomorrow, actually putting the pressure and the screws to the Biden-Harris transition team in a way they did not to the Obama-Biden team.
Well, they're already talking about putting Hakeem Jeffries, Democrats. We're not talking about like a minority. This is like a real inside Congress conversation about replacing Speaker Pelosi with Hakeem Jeffries, who is from New York. You know, I live in, I'm telling you, like, I've had very little interactions with Hakeem Jeffries, and I'm like, you know, in everybody's face. I've been in everybody's face in New York. So I you know, he's not progressive, clearly.
Time in Washington. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a Washington insider, but I mean, that's their solution, is just like change the face. And
it's not a real solution, and nobody sees through it. Everyone sees through it. And, you know, election for Speaker of the House is not some sort of secret, big, huge election you can put people over on. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows what this is. It's going to be Speaker Pelosi, or it's going to be someone who is structurally different than that. There's not going to be a kind of hot swapping, you know.
So
Steny Hoyer is never going to have his day in the sun. Poor Steny.
My God, poor Steny. The guy has suffered so much in his life. But the DCCC, which ran this camp, I mean, my theory is I don't think it was the DCCC. I don't think it was the DSCC. I don't think it was the Biden campaign. I think that we are in a situation. I think if frankly, this is very controversial, but I've heard a lot of progressives say this too. Even if Bernie were on the ticket, I know it's hard to look at it this way, based on the makeup of who was down ballot. It's not like Bernie on the ticket suddenly means the DCCC has put a bunch of progressives in instead of centrist Emily's List style Democrats and you know those types of neoliberals. You still have a ballot full of neoliberals running at the local level, and people know that. And Bernie on the ticket, I don't know if we'd have the same numbers. It's a very hard one to because of the right wing though. Keep that in mind. Yeah.
The like nonpartisan, independent, fierce progressive side of Bernie, I think appeals all the way from the left to the center right. And I think it would have pulled in a lot of people. And I think one of the bright spots you see from yesterday, and I'd love, you know, to hear what y'all think about it though, is seeing anytime there's progressive issues asked to exit polls, and people pull that every time, with a notable exception of Prop 22, which I hope we'll have a chance to talk about at some point. You saw progressive policy is extremely popular. And I think that any Democrat of any stripe running on basic social democratic principles would find themselves doing very well. There are no libertarians in a pandemic.
Well, okay, so I love that line. No libertarians in a pandemic. I guess what I'm trying to say is the right that turned out for the Republicans was so strong and at higher numbers. I mean, there was a spike in Republicans turning out. Republicans who were not going to, they didn't vote for Trump, okay? But they voted for everybody else. And what I'm saying is, I don't know if Bernie would have helped that. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think they would have voted for Bernie. I think they would have believed that.
They would have voted for Bernie, that's fine. But would they have voted down ballot for Democrats? Do you hear what I'm saying? Yeah, there we go. So we still have this disaster down ballot.
There's a phenomenon about folks having awful things to say about a political party except for their representative. Like, well, he's a good guy, but everyone else are a bunch of bums. And we see that a lot. And that cuts both ways. I work with very conservative Democrats from coal country. I work with, moderates, liberals, a couple lefties, but that's a real thing. And our caucus may have contracted in the largest voter turnout in history. And that is something that we have to figure out what's happening. And I think a lot of what Arun said is true. And how we govern in the minority for the last 2 years under a Democratic governor in a Tea Party controlled legislature is going to be maddening, but that's the work ahead of us.
I mean, that's what's happening in New York. They thought they were going to have a supermajority and we lost seats. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I mean, they were popping champagne in Texas about all the things that the new state legislature was going to be able to do, and that, that dog didn't hunt.
I mean, there are existing Democrats that have congressional seats in New York that did not win in a presidential year, which is like, so the whole theory, just for folks who may not understand this, Democrats have been saying for years, we've got in swing districts, we got to run like the conservative Democrat. And if they run in a presidential year, they're going to benefit from whoever's at the top of the ticket. And that'll protect them in those years. And it's obviously the off years that are the ones that are more vulnerable. And so they pour a ton of money into like Max Rose's race in Staten Island or, Ossoff's race or whoever. Except, okay, they lost. I mean, Ossoff ran for Senate.
And we see some of these things are just unholy money fires, where just amounts of money being spent on these races to get such little results over and over and over again. And at some point you have to ask if it's the dog or the food you're feeding it, So we have to do more as Democrats and actually spend resources to help working people be candidates. I mean, this is just, it sounds so simple, but but being,
well, that's radical.
It's expensive. You both have been there, right? Like, it costs a lot of money. And so it's just naturally when the DCCC hears things like I'm self-funding, that's when they start to, oh yeah, oh really?
But they still pour money in there.
That's still the first question they ask you.
But I get that. Like, they're self-funding, but then they still throw in another $100 million or $200 million.
I know. So what was
Isn't that where the acronym Emily comes from?
Yeah. Then they throw more money than God has at them. Yeah,
the acronym Emily's List, which is
early money is like yeast.
Exactly. It makes the dough rise. That's their whole theory, so they don't give early money, which Arun knows very well because Emily's List, Arun's wife, Laura Moser, ran for Congress. You want to talk a little bit about that real quick, just to give people a reference point?
Yeah, and obviously ended up running afoul of the Democratic establishment who, sought financially to punish her out of the race, not only locking out resources, but spending resources in a primary of people who were, worried about women being elected against a woman, like millions of dollars. And not only does that, hurt our feelings personally, but also you're like, this is the people's money. They're lending you their money with a certain understanding of it. And so I do think groups like Emily's List have an inherent class bias. That is something we sort of don't talk about, even in the modern Democratic Party that is so mired in talking about our biases.
We talk about it here on Fridays. We have a show on Fridays called Femme Fridays, where all we do is talk about radical feminist politics. And of course, matriarch is part of that too. On that note, though, can we just briefly, there's just a lot to talk about, but can we talk about Lincoln Project? Because this is like...
Yes.
All right, Lincoln Project, Republican-led, for those of you guys who don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars raised off of good, Democrats who thought, well, that was an interesting ad. Yeah, I'll give to that. Claimed to be organizing in states like Arizona, although I never saw that, or other states. And now they're using their data.
That was all I saw, yeah.
And now they're using their data. They bought a big billboard in Times Square. Now they're using their data to build a new Republican Party. So good job. But what thoughts? How do we deal with this? Because this is the future.
It feels like a fetish sometimes. They do it so much, appealing to Republicans, Democrats. But no, sorry, Chris, you were going to say something.
I'm trying to not be profane, but look, they made some good commercials. That's all I can say. And
you're a nice man.
Yeah,
He's an elected official.
I'm just going to.
They spent a lot of money. They spent a lot of money on staff. The kindest way you can look at those reports is to say they spent a lot of money having people troll through Twitter to find good tweets to retweet. Maybe that's somebody's job. Maybe that's worth 63 million. I don't know. There is no evidence in any of the paperwork if they were putting ads in the right places or putting messages that we know work to move people to vote. And what's more, the proof is in the pudding. We had an election where no Republicans voted for the Democrat. Therefore, this did nothing except rehabilitate the reputation of some Republicans who would like to sort of scrub their past of what I would call actual crimes.
Agreed.
With Ana Navarro's tears as their ointment that they can scrub the crimes off of. Ana Navarro, who thought that the Cuban vote was going to vote for a Democrat, which it never, ever, 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 ever has. All right, guys, I'm really grateful to you all. Chris, you got, Rep Rabb, you have to go save the country.
Yeah.
Arun, always a pleasure. Hopefully we see you guys next week, twice this week. I mean, it feels like the longest week ever, but good times. Special love to, who's in the chat? We've got Kowalski from Nebraska. Kowalski from Nebraska. I am so sorry. I didn't see this stuff earlier. Says an issue with the Hispanic vote was how the religious narrative went. Trump wanted churches opened, and that was huge there. I think I'm misreading this. People want comfort in crisis. Absolutely. And I think he really plays the bravado. Latino vote is obviously very complex, and people are starting to realize that or the media, I should say. I think that folks understand that. And then Kowalski also says, for Trump, minority support was up and white male support was down in the Midwest. So we're not racist, we're misogynist. Welcome to the lame duck, Donald Duck. I mean, I do want to touch on that real quick. We shouldn't focus too much on Trump bringing in 1% more Black voters, Latino voters. We have to see if the Democrats lost those voters, which by all means does not show at all. Because otherwise the whole narrative is going to be,
when people shift, they've decided they want to fire you and they want to hire somebody else, and so people decided they want to break up with Democrats, and some small percentage of them are giving Donald Trump a chance because he asked. It's that simple. He asked for their vote. I feel like some people feel like Democrats didn't even ask for their vote.
But some of that also, the Trump vote, the minority vote, some of it is first-time voters. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not like they pulled from the Democratic Party. There was a very, they told you to vote. They showed up and vote, whatever, like you said. All right, who else do we have here? David, you guys are free to go if you want to. Thank you for joining us today. David Legger, Jeffrey, thank you so much. Biden needs to reinstate the fairness doctrine if he does anything. Very true. Justin Coran says, it's looking like we will be unable to stop gerrymandering in 2022 and beyond. Further conventing minority rule. Yes. What can we do? Is there anything to be done? We touched on that this week. That is going to be a big focus of the show moving forward. I said that in my opening the day after the election. This all started in 2010 with Obama's shellacking, and then the fact that he still didn't invest in state parties, the DNC, and organizing on the ground across the country. We've had weekend parties, and as a result, we have a weekend message where there was no message of working people, solutions for working people being spread across this country. And as a result, the Tea Party, the right wing, was able to swoop in and capitalize off of that. So yes, we lost legislatures, and it's we lost seats rather than gain seats. Not great. Marty Hunt, they said that they want to nominate Hakeem Jeffries to Speaker. What the F is up with the centrist Dems? I think we just touched on that, so you know our feelings. All right, special thanks to Professor Harvey K and everyone in the live chat. Make sure to smash that like button. Thank you to MIDI Doctors and Jules for working the algorithms. And huge thanks to our mod, Chokin, for keeping the chat room honest. Guys, if you're not a patron, this is the time. Please join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. It's how we do this. We got to keep going. Got to push back. Independent media is how we are going to be able to fight. All right, take care, everybody. We have a special show tomorrow. You'll see, but be safe, and hopefully we'll know who our president is by the end of our future president is by the end of the day. Take care.